Hey guys, how you all doing? I hope you're doing good. Well, I decided that it would be a real cool idea to do a video about my time in America. I've already done a written blog, but I thought it would be really good to speak face to face about it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be using the notes that I wrote for my written blog. So excuse me if I don't look into the camera as much, but I will do my very best. So I hope that what I have to say to you is of great interest, and also just to finally say I'm really so thankful for the people that helped me to get over to California. So enjoy. So serving as a Cause for Life intern with Joni and Friends has to be one of the most enriching experiences of my life so far. I remember filling out the application for the Ministry and Missions Academy West Coast and thinking, am I even qualified enough to do this? And are those deciding whether I am suitable for the internship really going to be impressed with what I write? One question on the application form asked about my experience of working with disabled people. I simply explained that I was disabled myself with Duchenne muscular dystrophy and spent 7 years as a student at a specialist school for disabled children. Deep down, I didn't think this would be sufficient for me to be accepted onto the program. So when my application was formally accepted, I rejoiced in the fact that I did have something to offer. I realise now that we are all called to disability ministry in some capacity. It's not something you can really opt out of if we are to love one another and be all inclusive. The church must be open to reach all people, and that includes people affected by disability. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you'll be blessed. Luke 14:13-14. I had the heart for disabled people, so why wouldn't I have been accepted? Love is the biggest, by no means the only, qualifier for any kind of ministry. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. 1 Corinthians 13:1-3. Leaving my home in Chesterfield, England, and travelling the 5,000-mile route to Southern California was one of the biggest challenges I have ever faced. Flying for 10 hours by plane was quite an ordeal for me, with not being able to use the bathroom. Shock horror. Sitting in the same position the whole time, and the effects the pressure of taking off and landing had on my weakened heart. Throughout the journey, I had spells of dizziness and the odd palpitation, which actually continued for a few days after landing. I did not realise the flight would have such an effect on my body, since I had not flown since the age of 12. Jesus said that discipleship is costly, and I certainly experienced this in the suffering I faced just getting to the United States. God wanted me there, without a doubt, and He brought me through those struggles. I guess suffering is humbling because it keeps us relying on our Lord. I can say with confidence that it was worth going through all the suffering and initial homesickness for the blessed and fruitful time I had on the west coast of America. It was beautiful to serve others with disabilities and make some deep and lasting friendships. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Proverbs 3, 5-6. An important lesson I learnt on my adventure was that disabled people have something to give and teach, whatever disability they may have, physical, mental, or emotional. Disability ministry should be ministry that happens with people affected by disability, not just to people affected by disability. I kind of understood this already, in the sense that I have a disability and travelled across the ocean to serve. I just think the activities I became involved in helped to further solidify this into my thought process. When I read about family retreat before the internship had even begun, my thinking was that as a short-term missionary, I would simply serve my buddy. I was placed with a 21-year-old man called Blake, who has Down syndrome. He came to the retreat with his mother, Michelle, and two brothers, Bryce and Brett. I was made aware a week before the retreat in Arizona that Blake was actually going to be an STM for me, short-term missionary. We were going to be serving each other. For a number of years, Blake looked on as his brothers served as STMs and deeply wanted to do the same. This year his opportunity came to do just that. To begin with, I was a little unsure about this because I had looked forward to serving as opposed to being served. I wanted to serve, not be served. But then I realised Blake only wanted to do exactly what I wanted to do. I needed to enable his desire to be fulfilled by having the willingness to be served by him. After all, Jesus did command us to serve one another, as we see here. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." John 13:12-14. It was a major surprise to me when I arrived at family retreat to find that Blake was going to help me eat my meals. The difficulty for me was that during meal times, Blake liked to speak to those he had long-standing friendships with. They would be sat on other tables and walked past us from time to time. This was a major distraction for him and meant I had to wait longer for each bite of food. Paradoxically, when Blake remembered to feed me, he would often put oversized bites into my mouth, which made things messy. Although it took some time, Blake became increasingly more capable at feeding me, despite his own fine motor skill challenges. There were a number of times when food fell onto my t-shirt and into my lap, which I found quite humiliating. Some very wise words Joni Eareckson Tada uttered while sharing with the interns at the IDC, International Disability Centre, have stayed with me. Humiliation is the road to humility. I found it humbling being fed by my dad, but I was brought to whole new levels of humility here, with food falling on me and having to be more patient. If our Master Jesus Christ was humbled in his birth and death, then surely as his followers, we will have humbling experiences in life too. On reflection, I am so happy that Blake had the opportunity to experience serving in this way. Sometimes Blake would want to help me in other ways, such as taking me to the bathroom, but that was too difficult and complex a task. I also recall Blake attempting to lift me up under the arms to help me play one of the games on the carnival evening. These are just wonderful examples of his eagerness to serve. There were a number of challenges I faced in building a friendship with Blake, which originated from my soft-speaking voice caused by my condition and restricted mobility. At times, mainly during meals with the noise of many other people. When I attempted to articulate something to him, he had difficulty hearing and understanding me, so communication was not so easy. My limited mobility through using a wheelchair made it difficult to keep up with Blake, who was always full of energy and keen to socialise with others. That was a real desire that he had. Sometimes I'd be walking, or rolling in my case, with Blake, and then suddenly I'd look around to find he'd disappeared. I would turn around and spot him far in the distance with a friend. This would always cause me to grin, and with humour I would think, so that's where he is. Even with these few obstacles, I have some great memories of my 3.5 days with Blake, fishing in the pond where, for amusement, he attempted to push a live fish toward my mouth for me to taste. Yuck! Sitting and doing a Bible study together, helping him make a gospel bracelet in the young adult morning activity group, doing a duet for the talent show, and there are certainly more. Incidentally, during the week, the young adult group spent a small portion of each morning practicing a song to perform for the talent show. The song spoke of God's love and the good he has done. Toward the end of the song, Blake burst into tears and shouted to one of his brothers over and over again that he loved him. It may well have been that he was upset because it was time to go back home the following day, but I do also wonder if during the song God was touching Blake's heart with his love. I must point out the amount of love and compassion all the STMs had for the families they served. I remember seeing one severely disabled girl being carried in the Arizona monsoon rain. There was a story I heard where one STM would not eat until he had looked after his buddy's needs first. It was just beautiful to see disabled people so valued and appreciated. That's how it should be. All this love and uplifting of those with disabilities makes me think of the honour King David showed to Mephibosheth, who was disabled in both his feet. David said that Mephibosheth and his successors would always eat at his table, 2 Samuel 9:10. Some of the testimonies that were shared by the families on the final morning before travelling home were very moving. I won't go into great detail here, but the appreciation and thankfulness was clear to be seen as parents and carers held back tears. It's a real shame that the retreat lasts for such a short time. I hope that the love shown during this time is a love that is available to these families on a long-term basis. Keeping those relationships is key. Again, it was beautiful to be a part of. It was such an encouragement when reading Michelle's, that's Blake's mum, as I mentioned earlier. I was really encouraged by reading her testimony about the impact the family retreat had had. My hope was that Blake would have an enjoyable week, but at the time of leaving Arizona, I wasn't sure if that had happened or what influence I'd had. Michelle stated in her testimony, which I read a number of weeks after family retreat, that when I asked Blake if he would want to be a helper again, he said yes. Michelle also wrote that she was honoured to have me minister to her family. It was so uplifting to read those words. I'm really pleased with how the week played out, even though I found things exhausting, particularly the effects of the 6,000 feet elevation on my heart. I had the old lightheadedness again, which weren't that fun, but I fought through it in God's strength. Friendship Club at the Bridge and Oxnard for me was a very special time. I hadn't worked with adults with intellectual disabilities before, so this was my first experience of doing so. An important lesson for me was to understand that even though many of the members were almost childlike in their demeanour, they were nevertheless adults. I spoke to one lady who happened to be extremely small in stature, and I asked her age. The lady was 38, but when she explained this to me, I misheard and thought she said 8 years old. When I said "Oh, you're right," a leader who was sat nearby quickly corrected me. Because the people we served did not seem like adults in their behaviour and sometimes physical size, I had it in mind subconsciously that we were serving children. I knew Friendship Club was for adults, and yet still got things wrong. It was not a mistake I made twice, and the experience gave me better awareness. I think I had difficulty building strong friendships with a few of the members, possibly because my wheelchair stood out. I could see in their eyes a real look of uncertainty when I approached them. In a Beyond Suffering seminar at the International Disability Centre, one speaker mentioned that some with disabilities don't actually see themselves as having a disability. I assumed that because the adults at Friendship Club were disabled, they would all see past my disability. I'm open to the possibility this had nothing to do with me being in a wheelchair. It is only my perspective, which may well be inaccurate. I am very aware my softly spoken voice, as with Blake, sometimes made it difficult to put people at ease because they couldn't hear me. As part of the evening, there would be a time of teaching in the form of a skit or story. At table time, we would have a discussion based on the story skit. Even though I couldn't communicate easily in this situation, I was still sat with these people. My ministry at this point was a ministry of presence. I would like to add that there were also a good number of individuals with whom I had some good conversations and made good friendships. I received 1 or 2 hugs from them as well, which always blessed me. For every friendship club we were involved in, leading, I took charge of the worship. It was just beautiful to sing without musical accompaniment and see everyone worshipping in their own way. It didn't matter about singing in tune or making things run smoothly. We just loved God together. At one of the friendship clubs in Oxnard, a member, a man possibly in his late 20s to early 30s, asked if he could help me lead worship by playing the guitar. He didn't really know how to play the guitar as such, and simply plucked each string very hard and at random. As you can imagine, this did not produce a pleasant sound and made it very difficult for me to sing in time and in tune, but it didn't matter one bit. The heart behind the worship was the most important, and the joy and encouragement our guitarist had to have the opportunity to play. At Friendship Club, some of the members with intellectual disabilities were also helpers who gave support to other members. Another one of those examples where disabled people are not only served but also offer service. It is so easy to patronise people because of their disabilities and forget they have gifts and abilities. Just because someone has an intellectual disability, it does not mean they lack intelligence, wit or wisdom. I saw people who had such a great sense of humour and people who were very bright. I must treasure this experience in my heart and be sure not to make any assumptions about anyone. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my concerns. See if there is any offensive way in me. Lead me in the everlasting way. Psalm 139, 23-24. It can be so easy to view a disabled person and see only their needs rather than the person. I visited Grace Community Church in Los Angeles, and after worshipping in the main service there, I briefly spent some time in the disability ministry area. The moment I wheeled into the room, a lady uttered, "Oh, we have a new person." She then moved towards me and asked if I was able to have biscuits and water, and explained that if I needed to go to the bathroom, there were people to assist me. I really wish this woman would have started with hello and asked me my name. Because my needs were seen as primary importance, I felt as though less of a person. It is so important that when involved in disability ministry, or when you're relating to anybody with a disability, that we see first the person. We must treat disabled people as equals who have something valuable to offer and teach. This ministry in Grace Community Church has been going for 40 years, so even after a long period of time, there is always something to learn. I think one of my biggest regrets of the internship was not being able to travel to Haiti and serve the churches and orphanages there. Having the disability I do, and travelling to a third world nation would have been extremely difficult. Hearing the reflections of my fellow interns, the understanding is that even in a country racked with poverty, in a hopeless situation, the hope of Jesus Christ still shines. There were children in the orphanage that spent the whole of each day lied down in a darkened room, unable to move and communicate verbally because of the nature of their disabilities. But as my friends spent time engaging with them, they noticed the children's eyes open up a little further as they recognized that someone was with them, taking a loving interest. The intern's very presence was sometimes just enough to make even the smallest of difference. I think a lesson they learned is that we as individuals cannot always completely change the situation, but sometimes just being available is all you can and need to do. It's about doing the best you can whilst trusting deeply in the Lord's sovereignty. Yeah, I wasn't able to be there, but I hope and pray my input in the preparation sessions, picking songs, Bible verses, and giving ideas for the skits, bless the children in some way. It would be easy to think, why am I doing Haiti prep when I'm not even going? What kind of attitude is that though? Certainly not a godly and servant-hearted one. The situation was not exactly what I'd liked it to be, but God was teaching me to yet still give as much as I could and to do it not begrudgingly, but with a sense of joy. You know, sometimes the biggest disability that we can have is a bad attitude, and an attitude where we don't have a more positive outlook on life, and that's something that I've definitely learned too. So may we have not a disabling attitude. Suffering and disability is not pleasant in whatever form it takes, and yet God uses it for his purpose. God might allow Satan to strike the world and for hardships to take place, but he will fulfill his plans. The God of hosts is always the victorious one, always. What the enemy uses for destruction, God uses to bring hope and restoration. The Lord allows trials and tribulations, but uses them to make us more like Christ. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined, to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Romans 8:28-30. Joni Eareckson Tada's life reflects beautifully how in the most devastating circumstances God can bring life in life. She became a quadriplegic and yet continues to inspire. I won't forget the moment Joni looked at me while sharing with the interns at the International Disability Centre and said, "Tom, you may have been broken into many pieces, but God is going to use you to feed thousands." These words encourage me, though I'm not sure exactly how God is going to use me for his purposes. I'm not sure how it's going to look. I guess a common life lesson I would like to teach others, and know openly and deeply in my heart, is that the disabled are not to be pitied, but loved. Not to be seen as a project, but people made in the image of God, who we can build fantastic friendships with, and not people who can only be helped, but people who have so much to give. So we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For this slight and momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond measure. For we look not at what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. God bless.